Live everywhere.
Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Monday, April 24th, 2017, and I've fulfilled my obligations by beginning the show. Now what should we do? I'm out of lines. Anybody got anything? The president is crazy, possibly mentally ill, and certainly unfit for office. We knew that going into the weekend, but he really put a cap on it this weekend, I guess. Apparently sat down for an interview with the Associated Press for some unknown reason in the Oval Office on Friday. He had no plans to travel out of town this week. He stayed in town, of course, making sure to visit a Trump property for the 12th weekend in a row. I believe he's still going for that real estate professional designation on his taxes, if he even bothers filing taxes at this point anymore. But he stayed in town, went to the restaurant at his D.C. hotel, presumably to ruin a steak for his real estate visit. But by Sunday night, everybody was talking about the AP interview. It's, in fact, at the very top of the front page over at Daily Kos right now. Mark Sumner covering that one. I wonder whether he touches on the real estate professional issue. AP interview provides you a handy reminder that Donald Trump is knucking futs, as they like to put it, radio friendly. We can take that. I'm having some particular success this morning with the notion that, as I tweeted last night, I consider the entirety of the AP transcript to be a 25th Amendment filing. Basically, all you have to do is write, Dear Mr. Vice President and Cabinet at the top, except that, of course, in many cases, the Vice President and Cabinet are as crazy as Donald Trump is, if not perhaps even just a little bit crazier. So anyway, just a brief reminder that I think the congressional Republicans' best exit from all of this that I can think of at the moment is to simply give him, as somebody put it last night, a medical discharge. Simply say, hey, the man's a hero and our president and we love him, but it's just too damaging to his health. His health can't keep up with the pace of his heroism, perhaps. And maybe that's a face-saving way to get him out of office. Of course, we don't do much better with Mike Pence. I know that. But one thing at a time, please. I don't know how many emergencies I can solve for you on the radio at any given moment. Anyway, plenty of other things going on, but I think that's dominating the discussion today, as it should. It was a hodgepodge of topics, a mess in terms of the thinking and or logic behind his ramblings. I think it was also quite aptly captured this morning, as someone tweeted to me. I've had bowls of alphabet soup that were more articulate than this. Was it Daniel Dale who said this last night? He's got a great tweet storm on it, and I don't know what to do with the interview today. It seems like we should go over it because it's so astonishing. But then, of course, most of you have already seen it because we've all told you how astonishing it is. It's long. It would take an entire show. It's not a bad show to do, but I think we've all got the point. So maybe we'll stick to other people's tweet storms about it and just address bits and pieces of it. Yeah, Daniel Dale, that's right. Always worth watching. And he had his own tweet storm on it. The one observation I'll grab out of this for the top of the show, he makes in this one. If you saw any of the transcript or even the highlighted pieces that people tweeted around, you would have seen this. But Daniel Dale, a journalist in his own right, reminds us this is something he has never seen. The AP has to deem some of Trump's comments unintelligible, even though it was a one-on-one Oval Office interview. That's the point. I've never seen this, and I think he's probably right. You very rarely, anyway, see it in a transcript of a one-on-one interview, although I guess sometimes, maybe if it's just a pure transcript and you're really simply trying to capture every nuance rather than give it light editing in order to make sense of comments where people sometimes use verbal crutches or whatever. maybe there's more unintelligible, but ordinarily unintelligible for a transcript is something that you hear or you see used when there's crosstalk or people talking over one another or a large crowd of reporters trying to shout questions and the answer trying to come through the noise, but unintelligible for a one-on-one Oval Office interview. That's really kind of amazing. I mean, he jumps around. I do the same thing. I mean, I imagine if you tried to literally transcribe one of these shows, there'd be some unintelligible in there too. Maybe it's not such a big deal, but I think Dale notes that there's something like 15 places where you make an effort. Like, you wouldn't put in the time to try to figure out what did he just say in that stupid radio show. I mean, I know. Look, maybe people like the radio show. That's great. I'm glad that they do, but probably nobody's going to, break a bone trying to figure out what exactly did I say, because there's no policy import to it. When the president gives a White House Oval Office interview to the Associated Press, it's important to figure out what he's saying, and no one can do it. I don't really even know where to go with that. He says a million things in there that are absolutely nuts. I think the first one that grabbed my attention actually on this interview was Bill Kristol, who ordinarily I wouldn't be paying any attention to, but someone must have retweeted him, and he was remarking on, oh my God, I can't believe that the president just said this one. At some point during the interview, in speaking of his address to the joint session of Congress, the non-State of the Union looking address, right? He goes to the old standby line of many people are saying that this was the greatest speech ever given in that chamber. I mean, not just the best State of the Union address ever, which it wasn't, because it wasn't a State of the Union address, but also everybody said almost universally that it was actually the worst of its kind, or very nearly the worst of its kind. Perhaps there's been worse, but the idea that many people were saying it was not just the best presidential address there, but the best address ever given by anyone ever in the House of Representatives chamber. I doubt that there are more than a handful of people saying it, and if there are, all of them except Donald Trump are lying in the sense that they don't really believe it, and Donald Trump is just wrong when he says it. So, anyway, Greg Dworkin is here this morning. I am. Is there anything else happening in the world? I mean,
well, I don't know. There's this big French election that kind of was important.
That is like the best election ever held in that country.
You think?
I think somebody thinks so.
Well,
yes, that is happening.
It's going to be interesting. Yes,
and a lot of disagreement over whether or not to write off Le Pen or not, because everybody's understandably, you're worried about saying that person can't win. But
so here's the thing: Macron, who is the neoliberal centrist, who's never run for office before, came out of nowhere and said, "I basically am for the status quo." Finished first by a couple of points over Le Pen, who is a out and out nationalist. And I can't say exactly Holocaust denier, but denies that there's any responsibility for France in terms of what happened. So I guess you could just call her Vichy.
Sure.
And everybody else except for the socialist, Mélenchon, has endorsed Macron, the centrist.
Yes.
So basically the rest of the country versus Le Pen. Or as some people put it, Paris versus the rest of the country. So we'll see what happens there. However, even though the runoff is coming and the fight to get into the runoff is relatively close, most of the polling says that Macron, the centrist, with the endorsement of Fillon, the rightist, and basically almost everybody else, is comfortably ahead, 25 to 30 points. And not only that, the election's going to be in 2 weeks, so there's not a lot of time to change and recover from that. The American election goes on and on and on forever, and the timing is very, very different in terms of when the primary is, then when the conventions are, and then when the general election starts. This is all compressed into like a 2-week period. So in that sense, it's very difficult to compare the French election to anything that happened in the United States. It's just interesting that if it turns out that the polls, in fact, as they did in getting to this point, were fairly accurate, and Macron, the centrist, does win, that it turns out that nationalist candidates aren't having a great year. I mean, they're pushing, they're a presence when they were not a presence before. But as Nate Silver tweeted yesterday, nationalist candidates have done pretty badly since Trump won.
Well, he's the worst of the nationalist candidates in
Austria.
Yeah.
I mean, not to cut you off, but of course I love doing that because I'm from New York.
By all means, go ahead.
But all of these people didn't do as well as they thought, and I think one of the problems is, like Trump, you look semi-attractive to certain people until you actually win, and then you go, oh.
Right. Well, yes, we have the worst one and the dumbest one.
Well, Le Pen is pretty bad, though.
Yes. Well, not yet. She's not as bad as he is because she hasn't won anything yet. He's had a chance. He's used the opportunity marvelously to illustrate how much worse he is than we imagined.
Right.
So there is
as
that.
It turns out, Le Pen's father has been sued for being an anti-Semite. I had that story in the pundit roundup. And Le Pen denying that France had any responsibility for anything that happened during the Holocaust is pretty darn bad. So it's arguable that Le Pen is actually worse, and Le Pen is out and out being funded by Putin. So is not only on top of everything else a terrible person, but is funded by the Russians.
I suppose it's certainly fair to say that she's possibly considerably more dangerous. She's been raised since childhood as a politician, and has been a politician for a long time. So it's I guess the Trump mindset.
She knows her way around, unlike Trump.
Plus experience of sorts.
Yeah. Yeah, excellent point. So I think she's worse, even though she hasn't won yet. And I just
and
at
she's
the end,
French.
The very, very end of the list that I send you, I just sent in the Jean-Marie Le Pen charged for anti-Semitic remarks story from the Independent in the UK. Just to remind people that the apple does not fall far from tree.
No. How do you say that in French?
Apple does not fall far from tree in French.
Well, all right. Fair enough. I understood it. It translates as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Well, we do have some very wonderful French-Canadian listeners. Maybe they can help us with that. My French is absolutely not worth repeating on the air.
Okay. Fair enough.
It's even worse than my German, and my German is pretty bad.
Okay. Well, I don't know how you tell somebody speaking bad German. Germans can tell, but me, no.
Germans know. Germans know a lot. So, the Associated Press had this breaking tweet from yesterday. Defeated French conservative Fillon calls on supporters to support centrist Macron against the far-right leader Le Pen.
All right.
It would be great if the leftists did the same. They are so far slow to do it. Eventually they probably will. But with the compressed 2-week period, it's kind of important that they do it now, especially for unity. So Mélenchon, who's the defeated socialist, hasn't endorsed yet. And I don't think there's any excuse for it.
Well, I don't know if that guy will care.
Yeah, I don't know if he will either. But you watch what happens with Jeremy Corbyn in the UK. And you really can go out of your way to make yourself extremely unpopular with people by being stubborn. It's just an observation.
Okay. I'm...
No parallels here.
All right. I'm fine with it. We had a Mélenchon in this country at one point, didn't we?
Who?
He was, Charlie. He's, is he still around? Is he still in Congress?
That guy. You know, the southerner type guy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he is still in
Louisiana?
Oh no, he must be out now. Yeah, Louisiana. That's right. 3rd District of Louisiana. He left in 2011 and has been Secretary of the Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries since then. Yeah. So he's excited.
Yeah. I'm going to spend more time with my family fishing.
Yes, his family are fish.
Anyway, the runoff poll, which conducted the night of the election, shows Macron 62, Le Pen 38. So let's hopefully see that happen.
I hope it stays that way.
That 38 is like doubling of what Le Pen or the National Front version of that her party has ever gotten. So it's too bad that it's as high as it is, but it'd be great if she loses.
Extremely high ratings. That's great because it's better than even 9/11.
Yeah. Anyway, other things that are happening. We had that March for Science on Saturday with some fantastic signs.
Yes.
Not only sines, also cosines.
Yeah, I saw that one.
That was a good one.
I enjoyed that one a lot.
Yeah.
I joined in, too. I don't know if you saw that one. I saw that one that says protest sine, right? And they plotted out the sine wave. And then there was a protest cosine, which was also fun. I said I join in protest of the tangent. That was my big science pun of the day.
Oh, worth doing. There's another sign here that was also very good.
Yeah.
By Sasha Aiken tweeted that was there. And this is done with permission of the person. And there's a fellow who looks sick, S-I-K-H, turban.
Yes.
And
Okay.
it says, "Are you nervous to see me on your flight?" And then he turns the sign around, and in the back it says, "Worry not, the software I wrote for this plane is bug-free. Software engineer Boeing."
Yeah, I saw that one. And I did see somebody
That is
say,
also a great sign.
I hope they don't hold it against him over there at Boeing, but it doesn't.
No,
He might not still work.
they got permission to show his face and to do the whole sign. I have
Excellent.
that sign in the comments section over at the Pundit Roundup as well. So that's all pretty good. And I think that it was a pretty good success. There were over, we talked about this on the show, and observations from our listeners helped to point out that in the end, there were over 600 satellite marches.
Yes, there were a lot. And they were big successes, and they were very large.
Yeah.
Trump insisted they were very small, and they didn't mean anything. So,
Right.
that did well.
Right. So, very helpful. Justice points out to me that the proper pronunciation of Macron would be Macron, which, of course, I mangled terribly, but then again, I'm American.
Macron.
Yeah, Macron.
Yeah.
Macro, policy.
We're
Macron.
okay with that. In America.
Well, if he wins, I'll learn how to pronounce it properly.
Yes.
If he loses, oh well.
Yeah.
Let's hope he wins. So I'm going to work on my pronunciation, assuming he will.
All right. Well, maybe they'll invade and force us to.
So thank you for that. It's, one of the characteristics of Kagro in the morning is I come on and mangle names.
Yes, and then I take over.
I'm really very, very good at it. So let's see. What else did he write? He wrote something else here in French.
Oh,
The apple never falls far from the tree in
right,
French.
In French. It's right here.
Yeah.
So you should all look at it, because there's no chance we're going to say it right.
I ain't saying it. I'm just, just pointing it out.
Pomme, la pomme.
La pomme.
Ne
Anyway.
pomme. Okay.
The
done.
other stories that I think that are important to do. Let me cover some just basic Democratic politics policy stuff.
All right.
Here's a nice little, very short tweet storm from Will Caskey. It's only 7 tweets long, but has a lot to do with the fact
Okay.
that Nate Silver was tweeting over the weekend that there's really 2 big things that happened in the election, kind of validating some of the stuff we talked about. The James Comey thing was huge, and there was a big New York Times magazine story about Comey and how he made his choices. And also the blind spot for media coverage of Clinton. Everybody is perfectly willing to talk about Trump voters and how they covered Trump and what they could have done better to cover Trump. And they don't even talk about how they could have done better to cover Clinton because it's a complete total blind spot. So Will Caskey points out, Democrats have a thought regarding our torches and pitchforks at the New York Times. Remember how Hillary didn't hold press conferences? Remember how she stiff-armed the press and lots of caterwauling ensued? Maybe that was a really good idea. Maybe we should do more of it. The customary action when a paper is hostile to a campaign is to ignore it entirely.
Okay.
You can't stop them, but you don't have to feed them. And guess what? The only people saying the New York Times is important is us. They're not. They need comms people a lot more than campaigns need them. And as the belated reporting on Russia stories, well known by Democratic researchers pre-election, shows, they're not even useful to push research. So just shut them out. Shut out the entire National Press Corps. Was each iteration of butter emails by Glenn Thrush really worth attending him? Journalism is already fractured and decentralized. You don't even need to be mad at the New York Times. Just walk away and don't look back. That's his point. And there's a bigger point in there, which I think has a lot to do with, again, how the media approaches Democrats and Republicans in a completely asymmetric fashion, and the inability of the press to deal with asymmetric things. There's more of this here. I have some tweets from Jeet here, Jeet, one of my favorite tweet stormers.
Yes.
And, for example, Glenn Greenwald said to Jeet here, have you ever gone over what you got wrong?
Yes, I did see that.
He said, since Glenn Greenwald has asked me for a mea culpa for 2016, I had to oblige. My biggest mistake was massively underestimating the intensity of hostility towards Clinton on both left and right. Trump brought together enough of GOP coalition to win, and Clinton lost enough of Dem coalition for the same reason, Clinton's unpopularity. I had read articles making plausible arguments about Clinton's weaknesses as a candidate like this one, and he mentions one in Jacobin magazine. Justice, you can tell me how to pronounce that properly. Why Bernie can win. The pundits are wrong. Bernie Sanders is the most electable candidate this November. Plenty of articles floating around. And by the way, that's why you have the funny to some and not so funny to others. Every time there's a little election in a local town for dog catcher, some people write in, well, Bernie would have won that.
Yes.
I have to tell you, some people are not amused at it. I wrote that about the France election. I thought it was kind of amusing because I think the primaries are over. But this from Will Wilkinson was also very prophetic, why Trump might win. I had tended to discount such articles because based on 2008 to 2012, I assumed Democrats would run a super competent campaign, get out the vote and all of that. And in Dem primaries, I preferred Sanders for political reasons, but thought wrongly that Clinton had a better shot at winning the presidency. And connected to that, I had doubts about Clinton's strategy of pursuing moderate Republican voters, which I voiced but should have foregrounded. Greenwald is right on journalistic responsibility here, but the proviso is 2016 presented a special challenge. American journalism has a framework for evaluating two-party races where both candidates roughly are equivalent in qualities, and 2016 was not like that at all. Clinton was flawed, but no more than Romney or Obama or McCain. Trump was off the charts terrible, corruption, racism, misogyny, etc. To extend media covered Trump's terribleness, they felt they needed to balance it with a critique of Clinton and hence the overplay of emails. And just as media can't deal with asymmetric polarization in policy, and I'll just interject here, remember, the Republican House gets away with not being able to govern and being totally dysfunctional because the media can't deal with the fact that to say that would sound partisan. So they always have to balance it. Well, something. Paul Ryan is a wonk. They can't say he's not because that would be mean or something. But they never deal with the flat out policy problems. They're just trying to wrestle with the Affordable Care Act versus the American Health Care Act. And even though some of the better media figures who cover specifically health issues, Jeff Young and Jonathan Cohn over at Huffington Post, and so on and so forth, Dan Diamond, Politico, Sarah Cliff, the people who know the ins and outs will point out that there's huge problems with the Obama repeal and replace plan. Media in general can't just sit back and say this is a terrible plan, which is going to hurt a tremendous amount of people, is never going to pass, and the whole thing's stupid. They just can't say that. And so they have to balance it. Well, it's about the interplay, and they turn to horse race because they can't deal with the policy. So it's about the interplay between the Tuesday group and the House Freedom Caucus, or the conservatives, and what they're going to get and how they deal with the White House. And only rarely, except for the people who cover this on a day-to-day basis, will they flat out say, this policy isn't going anywhere, nobody can agree, it's stupid, and we don't even know why they're doing it, which would be the proper way to cover it, but they can't do that.
Yeah.
So just as media can't deal with asymmetric polarization policy, it can't handle asymmetric awfulness of one candidate. One thing that's still underappreciated is how good Trump and Bannon were at gaming the mainstream media, particularly the New York Times. Bannon knew to win, he needed not just Breitbart, he needed to plant anti-Clinton stories in the New York Times to reach moderate GOP, so he concocted Clinton cash fiction, planted it in the Times, got mainstream audience for it, and some, plenty of blame to go around, all are guilty, although not equally so, and all must atone. Go into no more on all of that. And thus ends the sermon. So, he just points out some facts, some real facts, about what's going on in terms of how the media covers it. And the New York Times absolutely positively refuses to look at it. They're just stuck in the idea that anybody who's complaining about us doesn't understand how awful Clinton was. On the other hand, we'll be happy to cover Shattered or any other book that says bad things about the Clintons because it validates what we did.
I guess.
And it's remarkably frustrating to watch them do that.
Yeah. A lot of I don't even really understand. I mean, I disagree with the approach that they took in their reporting, but it's hard for me to understand or believe that some of these writers who some I respect and some I'm just like, well, all right, they're professionals, but that's it. But I don't understand how they seem stuck with the idea that why is everybody saying that there's no culpability on behalf of the candidate? That's crazy. And I just don't know anybody who says
Nobody
that.
says it.
And I don't know why. I mean,
right,
are
the
you not
candidate
reporting
was flawed,
on that?
And the strategy was flawed.
Am I
That's true with everybody. And after you win, nobody pays attention to that.
Yeah. I mean, will it work better if I say, what's your source for that comment? Would that be something they understand?
The campaign was dysfunctional. Look at this book. Well, you know what? The Trump campaign was even more dysfunctional. They won, and so you're not talking about it. And that's the whole frustrating thing about the Republican attitude, which is endorsed and practiced by the press, which says, F you, we won. And that's all the justification we need. And that is the Republican governance strategy. And I find that the New York Times in particular, and media in general, is taking that strategy for themselves.
Well, that's probably
Clinton lost,
really
therefore it must be all about the candidate. It's got nothing to do with us. Well, actually, there were two big things. Nate Silver, again, had a tweet storm, not a tweet storm, but pointed both of these things out. And one is that Comey made a huge difference. And the other is that the blind spot for the media also made a huge difference. And both are important.
Well, who cares? What are they, facts or something?
Yeah, whatever. So, nice piece here by Dean Pagani in Medium called The Bully Next Door, which is a look at Chris Christie and his downfall. Oh. Which is interesting because a cautionary lesson for Donald Trump. Bullies don't win forever.
Excellent.
Meanwhile, nearing 100 days, Trump's approval is at record lows, but his base is holding so far, according to the Washington Post ABC News poll. And undoubtedly, this will be misinterpreted. 98% of Trump voters still like him. 2% are having doubts. But that doesn't measure the complexity of Trump voters. Firstly, it's only 100 days in, not even. And secondly, that doesn't mean that 10% of them are going to peel away. And thirdly, even the ones that don't like him aren't going to tell the Washington Post that. And they're not going to tell it now. People are very defensive about their vote. And it doesn't mean that going forward, they are rock solid. Only half of them are.
Yes. Well, yeah.
The half that are, screw them. But the rest, okay. I think we should talk to.
I think, well, I guess so. We got to reach out when are we going to reach out and understand journalists?
We try, but they're very, very snide about it.
Oh. Well,
I had a mini argument with Peter Baker from the New York Times, who had something not particularly pleasant to say about Democrats with a tweet a little while back.
Oh, no.
And then was talking about the Comey story. And he said something about, evidently Comey wasn't partisan, but nonetheless X and Y and Z happened. And I wrote, well, evidently Peter Baker is the worst political reporter at the New York Times.
Oh.
And he wrote back to me and said, well, we're going to take a poll on that.
Okay.
And I said to him, you have a great sense of humor, but my advice is let someone else write up the results. So yeah, they're defensive about it. They don't want to deal with the fact that, they tend to treat Democrats like crap as a basis for going forward. And the real mistake that they made, which they don't want to admit, is they, like everybody else, thought Clinton was going to win. Therefore, she was fair game to bust on as much as possible. They not only wanted to, but it's the proper thing to do to vet the candidate who's going to be president of the United States.
That's a fine excuse.
And they didn't do that with the other guy.
Yeah.
And therefore helped him win.
I don't know why that's not something that they're willing to cop to. That sounds like a good answer to me.
Right. But I think that's what happened, honestly.
Yeah.
I don't think that they were deliberately going out of their way to make Clinton lose. I think the opposite. They thought she was going to win and that they thought they were doing their job. And in fact, it worked out really badly. and they don't want to touch it and they want to move on.
Well, as I was saying that and saying, that's very similar to the problem Comey, I think, encountered. And
I think so too. I think Comey also thought she was going to win, so what difference does it make?
Right. There was
as Clinton famously said at a hearing.
Yes. And I think that there was a portion, I don't know which interview it was or which story about Comey, but maybe the one you mentioned, in which essentially the thinking that was laid out was, the FBI is going to look terrible if we hold back on some important news about the future president. This person is going to win and become president, and if we look like we hid it from the American people prior to the election so that she would win, we're going to look terrible, and almost nothing you can do is going to make the other guy win.
Even a little more subtle than that.
Yeah.
Comey's thinking, according to the article and people around him, is that so Clinton wins, yes, and the Republicans are already going to be spending years investigating her.
Yes.
And they're going to complain, as you said, that we overlooked it. And therefore they're going to yell at us.
Yeah.
And therefore they're going to investigate the FBI. And therefore they're going to spend years investigating us, and how can we deal with this? It's going to take up all our resources on protecting the FBI by announcing this now so that we're not in that situation.
I guess. But yeah.
It's terrible logic, but that's basically what he's saying.
Yeah. And well, it occurred to me that the excuse was so similar that maybe that explains not only the blind spot, or rather, not only the fact that it happened again with the media, but why the media seems blind to Comey's influence. I guess Comey isn't called upon to evaluate the media's influence in all this, but I suppose if you did the same thing that Comey did and you don't think you did anything wrong, then you also don't think Comey did anything wrong, and your reporting on Comey's influence will be, just like us, there was no influence.
Yeah.
So maybe that explains it.
Anyway, while this is going on, Mike Quigley, and this is a new report from CNN, I'm just reading as it crosses Twitter, Mike Quigley, who is a Intel representative for the Democrats, says there's definitely probable cause to think that Trump and the Russians colluded on the election. I
think I did.
And that, of course, is the big story.
He was quoted as, I think, saying probably cause or something like
probably
that.
Cause, yeah.
But, there probably is cause to have probable cause for that.
Right.
Yeah,
Meanwhile, in the real world, Politico reports Republicans sound the alarm on Trump's troubles ahead of 2018. Donors, leaders, and potential candidates begin to worry about an election that will be a referendum on the president's performance. And guess what? What happened in Kansas, even though we didn't win, and what happened in Georgia, even though we did win, but not well enough because we have a runoff in 2 weeks, that all matters. And so they're seeing that, and yes, it matters, and yes, party building is important, and no, it wasn't wasted money. And now the Republicans are starting to throw some money into a seat they're going to win, which is the special election in Montana.
All right.
So, it's, I don't get into the arguments about what the DCCC should be doing and, why aren't they more involved? There's plenty of argument to say that the best thing the national people can do is stay out of the local elections. But if it's going to be nationalized and about Trump, resources don't hurt. And in certain cases, like in John Ossoff's case in Georgia, he had plenty of resources. That really wasn't the issue. Didn't need the national for that. The grassroots raised it for him. So, Republicans are right to look at it, and they're right to sound the alarm, even though they won bigly, according to Trump, in each case. In each case, these are elections that really shouldn't have been competitive in the first place. And I think that whereas everybody knows, and I will endorse, that you can't read too much into what happens in 2018 based on a few special elections that are special in 2017. Nonetheless, Trump is doing incredibly poorly. He's the worst performing president in history at this particular point in time. The 100 days are coming up. We may well have a shutdown of the government because he wants a stupid wall. And, it's going to hurt. It's going to leave a mark. They're going to feel that.
Okay. I'm ready.
Good. Me too. So that's basically the summary for today. I did want to end on one thing, which was, again, I wanted to talk very briefly about the March for Science. I had also a 5 tweet short storm here I just wanted to read, where I pointed out I'm an MIT grad who was there during the Vietnam War. I fully understand the reluctance to protest and to get involved in protest. For some, it's funding and who funds, because a lot of these guys are funded by federal resources.
Right.
For others, it's a basic distinction between advocates and activists. We talked about this on the show.
We have.
That so many, regardless, will march anyway is a remarkable testament to how many care about this issue. And the feds need to note it. So there are over 600 satellite marches. That's maybe even more important than being in D.C., but they all matter. Salute those who march. You don't have time to march? Call your representative and tell them you care about this. Today's Monday. They're open. You can do it today. If you couldn't march on Saturday, or even if you did, today's a great day to call your local representative and tell them you care about this issue.
It is a very good day to do that. It's always a good day, but this is a particularly good day. They're not there, but they're open. Their staff is there.
Their staff is there. You're not going to talk to them anyway, so don't worry if they're not there.
Right, that's true. You're never going to get through. So you might as well just call and give the staff something to do on Monday.
Mm-hmm. They're begging for it. They want something to do.
I insist. Call now.
Absolutely. And with that, that's my summary for today. This is Greg Dworkin speaking with my friend David Waldman, Kagro in the morning. Thanks for listening, folks. And we'll be back tomorrow. At least David will. And I'll be back on Wednesday with David. And we'll do the show all week as far as I know. And, as far as I can tell, we'll be doing it live, right?
Yes, I think so. Bill O'Reilly done doing it live, but he's going back to radio, so you're not done with him yet.
Yep.
Okay.
By the way, we had years and years ago when Yearly Coast was in Austin, Texas.
Yes.
We had a fantastic F It Do It live party.
Yes, we did. That was the year
in honor of Bill O.
Yeah, he was fighting, I don't know, he was on a crusade against Daily Coast, among a million other projects. At the time, I think we may have been the Antichrist at that point. I'm not positive. But, and I think, what was it? He was angry because we had some kind of, perhaps a sponsorship deal for the conference with JetBlue, so he wanted everybody to boycott JetBlue. They're out of business right now, obviously, and so is he. So it was a Mexican standoff. If that's not racist, I don't know. Is a Mexican standoff or like a terrible thing to say?
I do know.
I should be conscious of that. As I'm saying it, I'm like, I'm identifying them as, all right. So that's probably, I bet it's bad, but I don't know. But anyway, yeah, there was, he's gone. JetBlue's still there, obviously. And, I don't think they've even beat a passenger lately. So I guess they're good for another year. They're certified to keep flying. He's gone. But yeah, that was a fun thing.
That was a theme party I will never forget.
Yeah, that one was pretty fun. I wish I could play the, dance mix of his Inside Edition tape. We played it in an endless loop at the party.
It was great. You had him just saying it over and over and over. It was fantastic. So highly recommend it for those of you who never saw it. Just imagine it. Imagination will work for you here. Take care, and I'll talk to you on Wednesday.
All right. Thanks very much. Take care. And I did wonder about the last show. Well, I guess he was gone on vacation by the time they announced that he was having a fake vacation. So I don't know if they did a conscious last Bill O'Reilly version of the Factor show. I wondered what they played themselves out with, musically speaking. I don't know whether they do that on The Factor. Maybe that was just back in his old days on Inside Edition, the Pulitzer Prize winning, Peabody, maybe not winning anything, award-winning show. I think they probably won some kind of an award. Let's see. What else is new? Without going immediately back to the Trump interview, we're going to end up back on it, I'm sure, at some point. I guess it's worth pointing out. Let's see. This morning I have seen Talking Points Memo just recently tweeting. Where should we start with this news? The culture of sexual harassment at Fox News Channel and Fox Enterprises in general is back in the news. And I don't even remember if I know, or I don't know if I even remember, I guess I should say, exactly what brought it back into the limelight. It never went away, per se, but now there's this flood of stories about it. This morning I had seen one from Allison Camerata, a former Fox News reporter, now at where? I don't know. Let's open up the piece here. CNN? Who knows? Everybody seems to leave and go to CNN. And that's who carried the news. Anyway, The Hill has this report. Ex-Fox News reporter Allison Camerata, Roger Ailes sexually harassed me. So, just more bad news about Roger Ailes. Nothing surprising in the sense of newness, just surprising in the sense that yet more people saying the same things about Roger Ailes. Your characteristic Roger Ailes smarminess, including, I guess the story that really, anchored this thing. No pun intended, because she's an anchor, Allison Camerata is. And yes, she went to CNN in 2014. Where is this bit here? Yes, right. She remembers an incident early in her career at Fox when she was in Ailes' office to ask about more opportunities. So, of course, right away, why this blonde reporter wants more opportunities. Roger Ailes, swing, time to swing into action. He says, apparently, according to Camerata, anyway, I would have to work with you really closely, and it may require us getting to know each other better. And that might have to happen away from here. And it might have to happen at a hotel. Do you know what I'm saying? And she says that she said, yeah, I think I do know what you're saying. The Hill's report goes on to say that the CNN co-anchor said she never went to the hotel with Ailes and did not tell anyone about it at the time because she was embarrassed. And it all seems like of a piece there, of course. And she goes on to say that she said the ousting of Ailes and more recently the popular Fox News host Bill O'Reilly, and I guess that's really where the resurgence in discussion about the culture of sexual harassment at Fox springs from, seemed to signal that the Murdoch family wants to know about the culture at the network. I'm not sure, but it's something like that. I think she has a sunnier view of it than I do. It feels as though if I take the Murdochs at their word, and that's where you and I have a problem, if you can't be dissuaded from that, if I take the Murdochs at their word, they really want to know what was wrong there and what the culture was like. And I don't know how you get there with silence. And I think that's a good point. Little discussion about Ailes and his history of being tossed out. A little reminder that Susan Estrich, ridiculously enough, continues on as Ailes' attorney and using that opportunity to get into this story to say that Camerata's allegations are unsubstantiated and false and whatever. Okay, so O'Reilly, I guess, really was the launching point for bringing this story back up. Talking Points memo this morning has this piece here. Former Fox News guest accuses Sean Hannity of sexual harassment. So I guess there's more work for the Murdoch sons, who are suspected of being the real prime movers behind this, or one of the sons. One of the sons doesn't give a damn. The other one appears to want to do something. Or wants to appear to want to do something. Anyway, what's up with Sean Hannity? Essentially, I'm sure at some point he realized, hey, everybody else is using their positions as stars at Fox News to get some, and I might as well do the same. Because after all, I'm a handsome fella, I guess he thinks in his mind. Sean Hannity says accusations of sexual harassment from a former Fox News guest, believe it or not, are 100% false and a complete fabrication. Oh my God. I don't know what to make of it. So who's been sexually harassed? And I thought, okay, a Fox News guest, that's, that could be anybody. One time you're on the show, or is it a regular or what? And is it somebody who's so closely identified with Fox News that it's almost like a lot of times Fox's people cross over from Fox News guest to Fox News regular. Like, is this person not on retainer as a permanent employee? It's Debbie Schlussel, who's horrible. And I mean, you can't, politically speaking, you can't go around saying, who cares? Fine. Sexually harass her till, kingdom come, for all I care. No, you can't say that about people, no matter how horrible they are. But you can say how horrible they are. That, I think, is still permissible. Debbie Schlussel, who is, I don't know, I mean, should we bring up her record? I think probably most other people, that name rings enough of a bell that you say, oh, never mind, you don't have to bring up the record. I know exactly who that is. And I hope that's the case with our listening audience. I'm terrible with those kind of names, and I can't even necessarily bring the specifics to mind, but that's a name that rings a bell right away, like, oh yes, horrible person. Well, she tells Tulsa, Oklahoma radio station KFAQ, because why not tell the Oklahomans about anything, I'd say, that Hannity repeatedly asked her to come to his hotel with him during a book signing event and a broadcast of his show in Detroit. She says Hannity called her after the show and yelled at her. She says, it was made clear to me that I didn't go back to his hotel with him, which should be clear to you, just by opening your eyes and observing your surroundings. I think she means to say that she was being yelled at because she declined to go back to the hotel. Hannity responded to the New York Daily News in a statement. He says, Schlussel has been lying about him for over a decade. Terrific. Well done, Debbie. Keep it up. And in an effort to slander, smear, and besmirch his reputation. To what end? No one knows. I would love to have spent the last decade slandering, smearing, and besmirching his reputation. I just didn't have the time or motivation to do it. And I also had no idea that Debbie Schlussel was working so hard at it. Let's see. She didn't, I don't know. Oh yeah. Well, look at this down here. The story has been corrected to show that Schlussel was a guest on Fox News Channel, not a contributor. So the author of the piece here, Kristen Salaki, had the same trouble I did. I mean, I would have been hard pressed to tell you that there's no chance that I would have identified Schlussel as, if you had asked me, like multiple choice format, open format, if you had said, what's the relationship between Debbie Schlussel and Fox News Channel, I would have said, I don't know. But if I have to guess, she's a contributor. But no, she was a guest. I don't know whether that's even a line that's worth worrying about, whether it's blurred or not. But Fox News has a stable of guests that are so regular that it's dumb to even continue to call them guests. But I guess they think they can distance themselves from accusations of being a hostile work environment if we say she didn't work here, so it's not a work environment. I guess that's the upshot of that. Let's see. But anyway, so let's see. We have Alison Camerata's new allegations against Roger Ailes. We have Debbie Schlussel's allegations against Sean Hannity. And I guess some of the reason why the Debbie Schlussel story is interesting is because she's as conservative and crazy, reactionary, jerk-ass dummy as anybody at Fox News. And so, I guess you could say, well, it's not politically motivated, although I suppose there's nuance among the right-wing, jerk-ass dummies as well. What did I call them? I forget what term I just used. It wasn't planned. Anyway, so maybe they have political differences among them as well. Lots of nuance there. But I thought I'd also bring this one up because Think Progress has an entry in this morning's compilation on sexual harassment at Fox News as well. Judd Legum with this one. The Forgotten Sexual Harassment Scandal at Fox News. The network's unbalanced approach to serious allegations. Very interesting subtitle. But the one that we've forgotten, I guess we're about to be reminded of here. Let's see. This is, it's Steve Doocy. It says here it all started with Steve Doocy, and I'm not certain that it did, but Judd Legum says this particular incident did. The story, by the way, illustrated with a photo of Steve Doocy interviewing Victoria's Secret models on Fox and Friends, an important use of that morning's airtime. It was, of course, Tuesday, August 10th, 2010, for those of you wondering, when would I have seen these Victoria's Secret models on the couch, just sitting there having an interview with Steve Doocy? The answer is August 10th, 2010. But, I guess they're no different from other morning shows in the sense that they very frequently waste time with frivolous pop culture stories, but whatever. Anyway, apparently this one also had some additional problems. It all started with Steve Doocy on July 6th, 2016. Former Fox News host Gretchen Carlson sued Roger Ailes, right? We remember that, alleging she was sexually harassed. The suit prompted an investigation of Ailes, his eventual firing, and a $20 million settlement for Carlson, which is actually good news because also heading into the weekend we learned that some $85 million had been spent recently by Fox News in making the payments necessary to try to avoid further litigation about the sexual harassment charges. But as it turns out, something like $20 million of that $85 million went to the victims alleging the sexual harassment, and some $65 million was spent paying contract settlements to Roger Ailes and Bill O'Reilly on their way out the door. Now, I don't know the particulars of their contracts or how ironclad they really are, but it seems to me like a more I don't know what to say, but it seems to me like the management might have an interest at some point in saying, well, I understand that we have these severance clauses in your contract, but to hell with you. I mean, I know you can sue and you might even win, but I'd be happy to have that litigation. This whole situation is going to cost me a lot of money anyway. I would consider that perhaps the possibility of spending another $20 million on litigation that I would lose would be better PR. I mean, I have to spend $20 million on PR anyway because I'm firing everybody left and right for sexual harassment. I would think that the best PR you could buy for your $20 million would be to say, I know we're supposed to pay you for severance, but that's like if we fire you because we don't like your ratings. If we fire you because you're raping all of the staff, I think that's justifiable. And no, I'm not going to pay you. And if you think you're entitled to the money by contract, come and get it. Convince a jury of your peers, well, hopefully not your peers, that you're entitled to this money. And you may win. Who cares? I want to be on the other side of that lawsuit. I want to be seen as fighting. But I guess Fox News doesn't. And there's some, financial reason to say, well, I'd like to know with certainty how much this is going to cost us starting now so we can really try to put this stuff behind us. Anyway, I think I had something somewhere about the amount of money that was going to the different sides in this fight, but I don't know whether I still do or whether I set it aside or archived it or what. But we'll see if I can't come up with that one somewhere along the line just to put a link to those numbers. But I think you probably all saw that too. Anyway, let's get to the forgotten sex scandal over at Fox, Steve Doocy's, and figure out where he fits into all this puzzle. The investigation of Ailes and the public standard it set for Fox News set the predicate for the ouster of Bill O'Reilly last week, following numerous allegations of sexual harassment. But Carlson's problems with Ailes began when she complained to him about the conduct of Steve Doocy, her co-host on Fox and Friends. That's an interesting point, and it is forgotten. We forgot all about that. I remember Gretchen Carlson. I remember her allegations. Well, I guess I don't, because her allegations were, Steve Doocy is the one who's sexually harassing me. And I guess it came out that Ailes was kind of inappropriate towards her as well. But her chief complaint was about Steve Doocy, and he's still there. Carlson's problems with Ailes began when she complained about him about the conduct of Steve Doocy, her co-host on Fox and Friends. According to Carlson's complaint, Doocy, quote, engaged in a pattern and practice of severe and pervasive sexual harassment of Carlson. Ducey was not named as a defendant, but Carlson claimed Ducey created a hostile work environment by treating her in a sexist and condescending way, regarding her as a blonde female prop. And here, some screen grabs from Carlson's actual court complaint, points 11 and 12 in this recitation of facts. I guess on or about September 3rd, 2009, Carlson complained to her supervisor that one of her co-hosts on Fox and Friends, Steve Ducey, had created a hostile work environment by regularly treating her in a sexist and condescending way, including by putting his hand on her and pulling down her arm to shush her during a live telecast. Interesting. Number 12 here is Ducey engaged in a pattern and practice of severe and pervasive sexual harassment of Carlson, including but not limited to mocking her during commercial breaks, shunning her off air, refusing to engage with her on air, belittling her contributions to the show, and generally attempting to put her in her place by refusing to accept and treat her as an intelligent and insightful female journalist rather than a blonde female prop. Problematic, I guess, because I probably would have thought, wow, Margaret Carlson is not an intelligent and insightful female journalist, but not because of her hair color. Rather, I fail to glean any intelligence or insights from her reporting. That I blame on Fox News. So in that sense, Carlson had it right. She sued the right people, but probably could have gone after Ducey as well. But I guess her lawyers told her, well, Ducey isn't the one with the pockets we need on this one. When Carlson complained to Ailes about Ducey's conduct, he told her that she needed to, quote, get along with the boys. Things went downhill from there. 10 months later, Ailes and O'Reilly are gone, but Steve Ducey is still on the air every weekday, starting at 6 a.m., and by the way, the President of the United States, as idiotic as this seems, watches religiously and tweets along with the show. That's a bad combination all by itself. So anyway, his conduct, Ducey's, that is largely absent from discussion of sexual harassment at Fox News. About a month after Carlson filed her lawsuit, a former staffer for Fox and Friends told Politico that, quote, everyone on staff knew about or saw Ducey make inappropriate comments, but most people just rolled their eyes at it. Some inappropriate and sexist treatment of Carlson by Ducey and co-host Brian Kilmeade made it on the air. It was captured in devastating fashion by Bloomberg News, and that video is embedded here, and I don't know how long it is, and I should just hit the play button just to find out. It's 2 minutes long. Gretchen Carlson is suing Fox News' CEO, and this might be why. I don't know. Should we roll some of this Bloomberg politics bit?
And some guy came up to me and said,
I don't even know. Oh, you know what? I don't have the volume up anyway. So, all right. Well, I'm sure her allegations are pretty solid. They certainly, I mean, they resulted in the ousting of Roger Ailes. Solid enough for me. Initially, Fox News defended Ducey, but indicated it would investigate his conduct. While we have full confidence in Mr. Ailes and Mr. Ducey, who have served the company brilliantly for over 2 decades, Mr. Ailes, of course, now gone, we have commented on an internal review, we have commenced an internal review of the matter. A spokesperson for 21st Century Fox, Fox News' parent company, said, but the investigation does not appear to have made a serious inquiry into Ducey's conduct. That's an important point. A longtime Fox News executive told CNN's Brian Stetler that everyone who I know who has been interviewed has been asked solely about Ailes. The executive told Stetler he thought that was odd because I haven't heard anyone address Ducey's status, and he was part of the original complaint. When the settlement between Fox News and Carlson was announced in September of 2016, it included an apology from Fox, saying, we sincerely regret and apologize for the fact that Gretchen was not treated with the respect and dignity that she and all of our colleagues deserve. It's unclear if this apology was meant to encompass Ducey's conduct as well, but while Ailes was sacked, very British of you to say there, Judd, while Ailes was sacked, Ducey received no public reprimand or punishment. Carlson's settlement with Ailes and Fox News appear to bar her from discussing Ducey's alleged sexual harassment, and I guess that's why it's been forgotten. maybe that wasn't the best deal to take, but I don't know. I mean, I hate to tell her not to take $20 million. It's one of the better payoffs that they've gotten for the women who are actually harassed. Last month, the Washington Post's Eric Wemple asked Carlson about Ducey. I can't comment on that, Carlson said. No surprise there. Ducey sticks out as an especially strident supporter of Donald Trump, by the way, in a network full of strident supporters of Donald Trump. One thing that didn't faze Ducey was the tape of Trump on Access Hollywood bragging about sexual assault. Ducey described the entire incident as a, quote, covert attempt to derail the Trump train. By the way, Trump train pretty much gives away the store on that one, but okay. And there was nothing covert about it. All right. Since becoming president, Trump has rewarded Ducey and his co-hosts with extensive access, including a recent interview in the Oval Office. Come on in, sexual harasser. This is your administration. We are like you. We grab anybody we want. Trump is not only a regular guest on Fox and Friends, he's a devoted viewer, frequently live tweeting the show, like a fanboy. Really true. All the love and attention from the President of the United States have, unsurprisingly, been good for ratings. Fox and Friends had its best month ever in February, averaging 1.7 million viewers, up 46% over the previous year. While Fox News basks in early morning ratings, key questions about Ducey remain unanswered. Did Fox News investigate Carlson's claims about Ducey? If so, what were the results of the investigation? Was Ducey subject to any discipline? If not, does Fox News believe that Carlson is lying or that the conduct described in the complaint was acceptable? The firing of Roger Ailes and Bill O'Reilly, the network's CEO and top-rated host, were billed as an effort by Fox News brass to change the corporate culture. But how can real change be possible if serious allegations against one of its most prominent personalities goes unaddressed? Good question. I have no answer, but good job reminding us of the role of Steve Ducey and how it's somehow been forgotten in all this. Maybe now, how do we follow this one up? Are there more stories from today about this or not? I can't recall offhand, but maybe the thing to do here is to go, I'll have to scroll down a little bit, and I gave this away as reading a while ago, and when I did, I wasn't sure whether we had ever really dived into the subject on our air or whether it had been something I had given out as, background reading in the past before, but maybe now's the time to take a peek back at this, because clearly there's something very serious going on at Fox News, and clearly the message, at least to its top level male stars, is that you too can do what the president does. If you see people you're sexually attracted to, you can just grab them. It's okay. We're cool with that. In fact, we encourage it. And you think, how does this even become how did this happen? Who says this is okay? And I mean, it's almost like, I guess people have pointed out, it's like straight out of Mad Men or something from these early 60s, late 50s, early 60s mindset where women were just playthings in the office at that point. And to the extent that there were any women around, they were secretaries and meant to be there for harassment purposes, recreational harassment, just to keep the troops happy. But for the most part, that's now passé, but not at Fox News. And maybe it's part of their cultural conservatism. Like, we want it back the way it was in the old days. Like, we kept blacks in their place and you could grab any woman you want because that's what they were there for. I mean, there's a certain way in which that fits in with their retrograde approach to everything. But there's more to it than that, I think. And I guess this will be part of why it's difficult to believe, as Alison Camerata attempts to, that you should take the Murdochs at their word in all of this. Murdoch's got two sons involved in the business, right? And I can't remember both of their names. Let me see about whether we can bring that up. It's James Murdoch, right? Is one of them. And the other, I don't know the other son. Let's see, Rupert's other son. I'm going to have to go to James's Wikipedia profile and see if I can click on his personal life section here and figure out who the other, what's the name of the other brother. Is that it? I see here an interview or a reference down at the bottom. James and Lachlan Murdoch. First interview atop Fox. Politics, Roger Ailes' dad, and plans for the future. Lachlan. I guess that's it. Well, anyway, one of the sons is a lot more aggressive at wanting to appear publicly like he wants to root this behavior out and at least put it behind them for financial purposes, if nothing else. Whether he really has a moral interest in purging this kind of, or, preventing this kind of behavior or purging the culture, I can't really say. But this one, we'll add this article to the background here. Let me just catch up on a couple of comments. Let's see. Let's see. Rebecca Roman's saying, Wonkette has always called Steve Doocy the rapey one, and I guess it's true. And Michael Musson pointing out today's story is a sexual harassment allegation against Sean Hannity. So I guess, did we get to that one? Is it a new one? Because this just says it came in 2 minutes ago. Is it not the one that we were talking about with Debbie Schlussel? All right. Well, if there's another one, let me know. And if it's somebody with a harder to pronounce name, by all means, bring it on. All right. So I've been threatening this since forever. Let's see if I can make my way over to this article. I've mentioned before, one of the, I think, key things in coming to understand how it is that Fox News became such a disgusting place. Inside the old school tabloid brothel that gave birth to Rupert Murdoch. You remember my mention of this story a while back. This is from, September of 2016, right around the time, I guess, when we were hearing from Gretchen Carlson for the first time. So that's probably what prompted this. This is a piece in the Daily Beast written by Clive Irving back on September 10th of last year. Early in his life, Rupert Murdoch learned two things. And that's the end of the story. That would be crucial in his path to becoming the, remember I had trouble with this one, archetypal. Is that how you, arca? Or is it arch? Like arch, archetypal mega media mogul. That's a lot of M's. Any examination of Murdoch's relationship with the disgraced head of Fox News, Roger Ailes, any attempt to assess the interdependence of the two men, indeed any scrutiny of the dark arts of the Murdoch empire, remember all of that, too. It's not even mentioned in a lot of this. Needs to begin in the summer of 1953 when Murdoch was 22. But before I even go on with this, the dark arts of the Murdoch empire, remember that a lot of what brought down Ailes, in addition to the allegations of sexual harassment and the culture of sexual harassment at Fox, was that he was misappropriating corporate funds in order to spy on people who either had been his victims in the past or people outside of the organization or inside the organization who threatened to expose any of that as well. So I guess that, too, a significant cultural problem at Fox News, and that, too, tied to Murdoch's personal background. For a few months, Murdoch was an intern at the Daily Express in London. He was not looking for a job. He had inherited a small provincial newspaper group in Adelaide, Australia, and he was going home to take charge of it. The Daily Express was a Fleet Street phenomenon. You remember, we read the intro of this a while back. It sold 4.3 million copies a day, but it was not a tabloid. In Britain, newspapers were still the nation's first resource for news. Television news was little more than radio with pictures. The Express was finely tuned to a middle-brow sensibility that appealed to a rising post-war middle class. In the newsroom, Murdoch saw the sharpest journalistic operation in Britain up close. The paper had a prodigious editorial budget. It had correspondents in every major capital in the world. Remember that we were just talking about that as being somehow uniquely British in a way. Wherever a big story broke, the Express had a bylined report, throbbing with cliches like "I flew into riot-torn wherever." In London, there was a team of 50 photographers ready to go anywhere. Behind this largesse was the paper's owner, Lord Beaverbrook. The staff knew that the final editor of everything, and often the instigator of assignments, was Beaverbrook himself, referred to as the Old Man. He was in his 70s. Canadian-born, Beaverbrook was always open to requests from newspaper interests in the colonies to place novices like Murdoch in his newsroom for a crash course in Express techniques. Murdoch was awed by the Express and by Beaverbrook. He called the paper the Beaverbrook Brothel. That's how awe-inspiring, I guess, it was. In one sense, this was literally true. One of his lordship's sports was to arrange for attractive young women to join him in the bedroom of his villa on the French Riviera, wearing only a fur coat that was to be slowly and elegantly shed. Everybody got to slowly and elegantly shed that same coat. How sanitary. At least one of these paramours was on the paper's staff. How interesting. I might have to work very closely with you. It might have to happen away from here. It might have to happen at my villa on the French Riviera or a hotel involving a fur coat that was to be slowly and elegantly shed. And by the way, fur is murder. Okay, but never mind. That didn't come for several years later. That was the basis on which women began to refuse. Anyway. Let's see, where were we with this one? This was an interesting comment to tell people too. You'll never be a millionaire working for me, Beaverbrook told promising journalists, but you'll live like one. And I think that's an important thing to think about in the Republican operative world and the right-leaning world. To a large extent, the financialization of everything made it possible for a lot of them to actually become millionaires working for him or people like him. But that hadn't been invented at the time. So it wasn't that you would live like as a millionaire on your own dollars that we could throw at you because of having financialized everything. But we'll use corporate money to make it possible for you to live like one anyway. And by the way, what did they think a millionaire lived like? It wasn't necessarily that they had luxury everywhere. It was that they could flash the promise of cash or luxury to women and use that to get them in bed or sexually harass them and get away with it by saying, you'll never be able to accuse me of anything. One, because nobody believes that there is such a thing as sexual harassment yet. Anyway, but even so, I live like I'm rich. That means I'm going to have the resources of the newspaper to defend me against whatever stupid allegations you're going to try and make. So you might as well just shut up and enjoy it, or make the best of it anyway. I can help you, baby. You'll never be a millionaire working for me, but you'll live like one. One of the most creative skills encouraged in the newsroom was the composition of expense accounts. Foreign correspondents elevated already generous allowances with limitless extras for entertaining contacts. I know this because for 5 years, several years after Murdoch's internship, I, a writer in this piece, was an editor at the Express who had to authorize the expenses. Again, by the way, I here is Clive Irving. So he was in the business of approving a lot of these expenses. A darker side to Beaverbrook was his vindictiveness toward those whom he thought had crossed him, something we recognize now in Trump. I discovered this the hard way soon after joining the paper. I assigned a story on the great playwright, director, pianist, and social wit Noel Coward. A higher-placed editor spotted this and told me to kill the piece at once. He's on the blacklist, he said. It was a long-held grudge. Coward directed a war film in which a British frigate was sunk, and floating among its wreckage was an issue of the Express with the front-page headline, "No War This Year," reminding the audience that Beaverbrook had seriously misjudged Hitler's intentions. A little bit like our current president, I think, misjudges a lot of people. But anyway, don't remind him of the fact that he's wrong. That's an interesting grudge to hold. Anyway, it's not even a matter of one of his girlfriends didn't get a part in the film. I thought we were going to go there. That probably happened too. There were many names on the covert list of non-persons. Sometimes nobody could figure out why they were there, like the no-fly list. Even people close to Beaverbrook and an expert at sensing his whims were baffled as they executed the orders, an experience common to the courts of despots, but not normal at this level in newspaper newsrooms. This was not normal, this is a prototypical example of the this is not normal complaint. Gee whiz. In that newsroom, Murdoch would have immediately seen another Beaverbrook mandated effect in action, the intense competitive reflexes. Scoops, great and small, were required daily. Beaverbrook himself fed tips from his ring of highly placed political sources. He also relished scandalous gossip, and the paper, restricted by Britain's aggressive libel laws, became adept at innuendo that only its savvier readers could decode. Murdoch saw the polished craft of the editors, crisp, succinct writing, grabby headlines, grabby, striking photography, and it was this level of craft that was the first of the skills that he absorbed himself and would subsequently always demand of his own journalists. The second lesson was to appreciate the importance of owning a paper and, like Beaverbrook, having his way with it. Many years later, when he was acquiring businesses in the U.S., he stressed the need for 100% ownership. Then you don't have to take any crap from anybody. Probing the vocational DNA of a man as complex and elusive as Murdoch can only go so far, but his brief time in that London newsroom was imbued with the thrill of the age of hot metal publishing at its peak. When the press run began with the first edition early in the evening, the whole newsroom rode the rumble like a boat on a wave. For a budding Charles Foster Kane, it was mesmerizing. Eventually, Murdoch's perception of journalism's true market value went beyond its accepted professional constraints. He grasped what others had not. News could be monetized as a universal mass commodity. To do that required a far looser boundary between news and entertainment. And at another stage in its evolution, news needed to be aggressively non-elitist, to appeal on a more primal level to base instincts, to play on fear, prejudice, and grievances. The most successful of Murdoch's tabloid editors defined his target reader as the bloke you see in the pub, a right old fascist, wants to send the wogs, that would be people of color back in the old days, back, buy his poxy council house, public housing. He's afraid of the unions, afraid of the Russians, hates the queers and the weirdos and the drug dealers. So that does sound rather familiar, doesn't it? Okay, let's see. What else have we here? The apotheosis of this formula, at least in print, was the revolting spectacle that unfolded in October of 2013 at the Old Bailey Criminal Court in London. The newsroom of Murdoch's largest-selling tabloid, The News of the World, had practiced phone hacking in pursuit of scandal on an industrial scale. More than 7,000 phones had been hacked, most egregiously of a murdered schoolgirl, as well as those of the families of victims of the 2005 London terrorist bombings and the families of soldiers killed in Iraq and Afghanistan. The case was so damaging that Murdoch closed the paper. The editor, Andy Coulson, was jailed for 18 months. But the chief executive of Murdoch's British newspapers, Rebecca Brooks, was cleared of charges of a conspiracy to pervert the course of justice. Brooks is now back in the senior job in the Murdoch empire, and Murdoch himself, having made a rather uncharacteristic public apology for the trespasses of his newspapers, escaped any lasting contamination. Well, we'll see. I mean, this was back in September. Anyway, just a brief aside here. Michael Musson has also said to me, commented, don't forget at least 15 women accusing Trump of sexual assault and or harassment. Maybe missed the real link between him and Fox News. That's true. That's a good point. I don't think anybody has forgotten any of that. But, yeah, I mean, interesting that he's not just devoted to them for their news. He shares a hobby with Steve Doocy. Definitely worth bringing up any chance you get. I don't know if it's going to have any impact, but, add it to the file. Why not? Don't forget about it. That's certainly the case. All right. Back to the article here. However, Murdoch's culpability doesn't rest on any legal proofs. The journalistic black ops of his tabloids were part of a newsroom culture that was clearly driven by the editorial goals he set, if not requiring his direct involvement. Vendettas were conducted by his editors against perceived enemies with a vindictive savagery that makes Beaverbrook's blacklist seem like mild reproof. Indeed, there's a cultural consistency in the behavior of all the tabloid news operations Murdoch has built. In television, its most consequential creation is Fox News, a tabloid on steroids. Roger Ailes isn't a journalist by any of the classic definitions of journalism, and that's important to point out too, right? Here he sat at the helm of Fox News for so long, and he's not traditionally a newsman. So that's well worth remembering. He was a political operative first and foremost, and that's why he was hired. So let's see. Roger Ailes isn't a journalist by any classic definitions of journalism, but he has presided over and shaped the absolute and final expression of where journalism has been driven to by Murdoch. Ailes, the most gifted black ops schemer in modern politics, was able, through Fox News, to take those skills and use them to build a multi-billion-dollar business based on the debasement of news. And mind you, this is, again, I'll say again, September of 2016. If anything, we're only at large, I think, among the population in September, only then perhaps beginning to become aware of the fake news epidemic and the place that would bring us, and the gaslighting of America. We were talking about that, but I don't think we had fully formed picture of just how deep this went, or at least it wasn't something shared by the mainstream press until immediately after the election. So to say in September of 2016, to point out that Ailes was the most gifted black ops schemer in modern politics and that he was building Fox News with those skills into a multi-billion-dollar business based on the debasement of news is crucial and important. Again, not the first to market either. I mean, clearly we've been saying on this show, and people who listen to this show and speaking online inside the net roots, we certainly have been saying for a long time, Fox just doesn't qualify in many cases as news. We've been calling for years for the colleagues of Fox News Channel reporters in the White House Correspondents Association and the press rooms everywhere to stand apart and to say these guys aren't our colleagues. They don't do news the way we do news. They're a propaganda organization. And it was very difficult for them to do that. And a lot of times it had to do with the fact that people moved freely in between the two, but rather the in between the two, meaning the traditional press and Fox News. You had people, you move up the ranks in CNN and Fox News offers you a chance to be the chief White House correspondent. So you go and you take it because nobody's going to dislodge the current CNN White House correspondent. So you move to Fox, and sometimes people come up the ranks in Fox and move elsewhere. And it's always, of course, possible to separate people from the organization they work for. I mean, it would be disastrous for everybody if you could never do that. But, people gave one another in the press, like to give one another professional passes or personal passes. Oh, he's a good guy. He's a good, hardworking reporter. We came through journalism school together, or we worked together at XYZ operation. Now he works at Fox, and, there's an editorial bent, forces him in one direction. I don't think it's him. I think it's the editors. I think it's the ownership, whatever, stuff like that. Right? So they never really want to just pin what ought to have been pinned on the company for a long, long time. But we began to see a change in the way most people were willing to regard Fox News in this election and immediately afterwards. Anyway, I just thought that was a rather important thing to point out in September, the debasement of news as a business model for Fox. Continuing, though, with the article, there are, it now seems, salacious echoes of that Fleet Street newsroom in the 1950s, what Murdoch called the Beaverbrook brothel. Andrea Tantaros, remember that she also made these allegations, one of the former Fox News hosts now accusing Ailes of sexual harassment, described the newsroom as a sex-fueled Playboy Mansion-like cult, steeped in intimidation, indecency, and misogyny. And the $20 million settlement to Gretchen Carlson in her sexual harassment case, plus undisclosed settlements in other cases, suggest a truly systemic pressure on women. Once more, Murdoch has escaped any suggestion that he knowledgeably consented to this regime. And to be sure, it is true that all of Murdoch's news executives in print and in television, of all of them, Ailes was granted a freedom as close to autonomy as has ever been permissible in a Murdoch business. People who prove to be so talented that they begin to overshadow the boss are usually placed in the ejector seat, equipped with a golden parachute. It's only natural that Ailes should take a $40 million payoff and then immediately, albeit furtively, become an advisor to the Trump campaign. Let's not forget that. What clearer synergy could there be than between the cynical catering to bigotry so well defined by that Murdoch tabloid editor and so basic to the Murdoch brand and the toxic narratives that drive Trump's ascent? Another great point early on. Murdoch's genius, if it is that, has been to devise a common language and culture between the messenger and the audience to an extent not seen before. Murdoch, Ailes, and Trump have all argued that their narratives are directed at people not previously acknowledged to have existed by, quote, mainstream media. They provide, they believe, a countervailing force to elitism and political correctness, and the only messengers who really understand the legitimacy of aggrieved nativism. By the way, this is a tactic for which Steve Bannon has been desperate to claim credit. And interesting how far he got initially and how I guess there's pushback now. Fox News, I assume, will have no interest in promoting him as the genius responsible for all of this, although I guess it's possible that they might want to push off some, as long as they get to keep the money, they might want to push off some of the blame onto him. But he's got his own platform now for making the claim that it was really his invention. He can use Breitbart to say that he's the genius behind arguing that the narratives ought to be directed at people not previously acknowledged to have existed by the mainstream media and provide a countervailing force to elitism and political correctness. But it's all right there. It all seems pretty familiar now. We need to reach out and understand those people. That's all. In sum, this is less an ideological movement than a cultural one. With Murdoch, attacks on his influence simply reinforce his conviction that his opponents are aloof and out of touch. In the 1970s, as he was building his business in the U.S., Abe Rosenthal, the executive editor of the New York Times, said that Murdoch was, quote, a bad element practicing mean, ugly, violent journalism. To this day, if there are two journalistic institutions that Murdoch despises more than any others, they are the New York Times and the BBC. One of the few public service broadcasters still free of commercial and political agendas, in spite of efforts in Britain to undermine it by Murdoch and his henchmen. The Murdoch tabloids and Fox News have carefully seeded their narratives with a whole set of toxins: anti-intellectualism, anti-science, hostility to the other, and most poisonously, a contempt for truth. It's not that they believe in cultivating an audience of know-nothings. It's that they have discovered how to dictate to that audience what should be known and what should not be known. An alternative truth system. That is interesting. That is true. But I want to reread the way they put that. That's interesting. It's not that they believe in cultivating an audience of know-nothings. It's that they have discovered how to dictate to that audience, who are already know-nothings, I guess, what should be known. You don't want to be a know-nothing, right? Here are the things you need to know. And what should not be known. Here are the things that are. If they've come to your attention, you can safely ignore them because they're fake news. an alternative truth system, alternative facts. Yay. This ethical inversion is proving hard to counter. Mockery and satire fall flat because it's hard to be more bizarre than the narratives being mocked. It is true. It's very difficult. Even talents as sharp as Stephen Colbert, John Oliver, and Jon Stewart can't inflict harm. The simple discipline of fact-checking has no impact on the purveyors of fact-free news. Established norms of balanced reporting based on equivalence frequently failed to indict the absurd. Gullibility is more decisive than knowledge. In this election, all the old rules of journalism are in retreat, and there aren't any new rules to replace them. It's a rush to the bottom, and one man led it. And that is the end of the article, but not the end of the discussion. That is amazing, actually. Now, looking back on this is the right time to read this article. A rush to the bottom, one man led it. True, but I don't know. Maybe it wasn't so true that it's one person led it. But interesting from the perspective of hearing Greg outline the weekend's events with respect to press read broadly, because there are certainly members of the press who are not doing this, but the press refusal to acknowledge any role and any wrongdoing or any mistakes, anyway, having been made in coverage in the course of the election. Not interested, apparently. And yet here, even in early September, we knew, and it was obvious to a lot of us by that point, at least this point, that the old rules of journalism were in retreat and there weren't any new rules to replace them. So it wasn't that this guy waited for the benefit of hindsight after the election and the surprise victory of Trump. And you didn't have to. It was obvious that the old rules of journalism, just the fact that he had made it to the nomination on the Republican side and was being treated as though he were important enough to cover, and more than that, he was being given preferential coverage. Even if you think that he wasn't, even if you think that most of the press coverage of him was at least implying that he was a ridiculous figure, and a lot of it did. But the upshot of it was, I guess among the audience of know-nothings who had a entire television network dedicated to trying to dictating to them how to interpret the signs and visuals that they were getting from other news outlets as well. Okay, only one outlet was willing to give them a framework within which to understand what they were seeing, and they were seeing a lot of it. Somebody made a great point over the weekend talking about the disparities in the tenor of the coverage, and certainly, we've a million different examples of how Hillary Clinton got a bad rap and things, and you don't have to be a Hillary Clinton fan to acknowledge that. Many Bernie supporters also very much willing to recognize that as between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, she tended to get a much more seriously bad rap than Trump did. But aside from all of that, somebody made a great point, good observation, just reminding me and everybody else who was listening on Twitter, in addition to the tenor of the reporting, there was also just the volume of it. Do you remember how many times, for instance, cable news networks interrupted their regular programming to show, for instance, Hillary Clinton's plane arriving at an airport in preparation for a rally? How many of Hillary Clinton's campaign events were shown on television live instead of the regular programming? Now, there is some possibility for pushback here, of course. It wouldn't be, I would believe it. I don't remember the exact details of how things went at the time, but if a reporter then said to me, well, yeah, one of the reasons you never saw a Hillary Clinton event aired live on television in place of regularly scheduled programming on cable news was she rarely allowed press access to it. and Trump couldn't get enough of it. Of course, he brought them in as captives, and that never fazed them. Well, I'm on hand to document the atrocities. Forget the fact that I'm having garbage thrown at me at the time. I'll report that. But surely you can all see how ludicrous this guy is. But everyone was constrained from saying, I'm reporting from the scene of a moron riot, and the moron in chief has said something even more idiotic than he said yesterday. Instead, they all just pointed the camera and said, huh? Aren't we all rolling our eyes together at home? Well, I was. They were. They weren't wrong. We were rolling our eyes at the guy together. But we forgot that there were hundreds of thousands of other people watching and saying, what am I, if anything, at best, if they weren't saying, yeah, right on, he wants the Mexicans to get killed, or whatever it was that they happened to be cheering that day, then even if they were willing to question, what should I be making of this? There were 10 outlets and cable news networks nationally, whatever the number is, saying, we don't know what to make of it. We fact checked it, and that he said that, and he said that, and that's kind of wrong, but we can't tell you what to make of it because our journalistic ethics prevent us from doing so. And that's fine and dandy, I guess, in the abstract, all by themselves. That it's not an inherently invalid approach for one paper to take. But the problem, I guess, is when everybody absent one takes that approach, and the one that holds out says, no, we're going to tell you outright that we're in favor of this, and this is right, and we're going to spend our programming day telling you why, and giving you other fake garbage news to prove that we're right about it being right. Well, these are the two views being presented to you. One that says he's right and here's why, and not one that says, no, he's wrong and here's why. And there's fact checking, but he's wrong and here's why. And he's a dangerous ideologue and an idiot, and he has no idea what's going on. I mean, he got the numbers wrong. That's not the same as saying it doesn't matter whether he got the numbers right. He'd never be able to do this. And if he was able to do it, it would be horrible because he's a fascist and an idiot and a dictator, and we should have nothing to do with him. As opposed to, well, he said 35 billion and the real answer is 36 billion. So there you have it. But her emails, right? There wasn't anything like that. But at the same time, the objective, hands-off news approach from the other channels that were not willing to say Trump's a liar and an ideologue and a bigot and a moron and a danger to America and the world, they were willing to say with great specificity what was terrible and awful and illegal and possibly dangerous about Hillary Clinton. I think. I mean, maybe that's my own slant talking, but it's certainly what it felt like. And there was no, network that, and who would we turn to for this judgment? Surely Fox News fans and Donald Trump fans would have said, well, which network is pro-Hillary? All of them. And I might even say some days, even Fox. They're trying to do both sides. They're just like the regular news network guys, which, is all actually fun. Funnily enough, part of the act, how you disguise yourself as a news network, is occasionally piss off your own viewers and make them think that you have the opposite slant that you have, I guess. And I guess that's what Shep Smith was there for. But, the idea that there was a dedicated cable news network out there that was just pro-Hillary, flat out pro-Hillary, the way Trump got pro-Trump coverage out of Fox, I don't know who believes in that. I think that's actually a fairly ridiculous assertion to make. All right. About 20 minutes or a little bit less left in the show. We'll leave off of the Fox thing for just a moment. I think we got to just about everything, although I feel like there were a couple other news items perhaps to toss in there, but I guess not. We'll just keep monitoring Twitter just in case. Thank you everyone for your comments and direction during the show. Other things that really got to be put on the record here. You know what? let's go over here without going back to the AP transcript. We can go back to that area of inquiry, I guess. The mind, such as it is, of Donald Trump and how it works, such as it might be said to work at all. The Washington Post had an interesting entry this morning. Is it this morning? From Ashley Parker and Robert Costa. It was actually yesterday afternoon that they posted this one. It might run in today's paper. Everyone tunes in. Trump's obsession with cable TV. Makes for a good segue, because what cable TV channel is he obsessed with? You know it. Fox News, of course. Let's see what they have to say here. During a small working lunch at the White House last month, the question of job security in President Trump's tumultuous White House came up, and one of the attendees wondered whether Press Secretary Sean Spicer might be the first to go. And I think a lot of mainstream media and mainstream media consumers wondered that early on, and it was hard not to join them in wondering that early on, as his performances were so woeful. But we got an early hint that it wasn't going to happen, and it jives very closely with what we hear here. The president's response was swift and unequivocal. "I'm not firing Sean Spicer," he said, according to someone familiar with the encounter. "That guy gets great ratings. Everyone tunes in." I'm not even doing my Trump impression on that one, which is amazing for a number of reasons, not the least of which is Sean Spicer doesn't get ratings per se, but okay, everyone tunes in. And of course, everyone tunes in for the same reason that all the cable news networks tuned in to Trump rallies during the campaign. They want to see what ridiculous, completely false, obvious lie he lays down next. But when he does it, they're not going to say it's a lie per se, but maybe they'll fact check it, and that gives them something to do. And everybody says they're covering correctly. They're exposing the idiocy. And even I watch. I don't watch, but I watch people watch, and I watch the aftermath too. It's interesting to see the train wreck. Trump even likened Spicer's daily news briefings to a daytime soap opera, noting proudly that his press secretary attracted nearly as many viewers. Everything is about ratings to this guy. One of the few things, I guess, that I'll pause to point out from Trump's AP interview. There are a million things. I mean, that I could literally do the whole week about that, just parsing that interview, because it's very long, for one thing. But it's chock full of insanity for another. And each sentence has 10 things wrong with it, each one more nuanced and interesting than the next. One of the things that was ridiculous and inappropriate that he said was that he was pointing out that whenever he goes on one of these morning shows, especially the Sunday shows, their ratings are sky high. I bring the ratings. I know I'm successful. I measure my success by the ratings I bring to these shows. And for a guy who measures success by counting his money, it's not going to be any different. He wants to quantify everything. That's just his mindset. So ratings are everything. But what was really and truly weird was I can't even remember exactly how he phrased it, but he said that his appearance on the show, whatever it was, Face the Nation, I think he was talking about it. And then he loved to make his joke. I call it Deface the Nation. Ha ha ha. I'm so clever. But he pointed out it was the highest ratings for that show when he was on it. Even, I don't know whether he said it was even higher or since 9/11. Since the coverage of the morning of September 11th, 2001, when the World Trade Center came down. As if that was like, well, that was the highest rated. I mean, it may have been, but of course the entire country was tuned in, not because they were like, well, look at the quality of this programming. This has got really interesting angle on the destruction of the World Trade Center, much more so than it was just, you turned on whatever you had to turn on, because the country was under attack, and God only knew if we were going to survive this whole thing and how much more was going to happen. It was a national and international disaster, and people were tuned in almost basically on the emergency broadcasting network basis. But who even looked to see what the ratings were of 9/11 broadcasts? I mean, with the possible exception of Osama bin Laden, I can't think of anybody who would have said at any point ever in their lives, for any reason, even the executives at the news stations. So what were our ratings on 9/11? I just want to be sure. And of course, somebody did point out, no, even he didn't do that. He didn't go and actually look to find out what it was. It wouldn't matter. To him, that was like a measure of humility that he added into this. Well, I do acknowledge that it's possible that 9/11 had more attention being paid to it than I did when I went on Face the Nation that one time, which no one remembers. But I just thought that was rather amazing insight, among a million amazing insights into that thing, including the one where he says that his speech was the greatest one ever given in the history of anything. And, 200 other things that were completely, unbalanced. I mean, indicative of an unbalanced mind is what I mean here. All right, let me continue with, this Washington Post piece here, though. So he wasn't going to fire Sean Spicer because ratings. For Trump, a reality TV star who parlayed his blustery yet knowing on-air persona into a winning political brand, television is often the guiding force of his day, both weapon and scalpel, megaphone and newsfeed. And the president's obsession with the tube as a governing tool, a metric for staff evaluation, and a two-way conduit with lawmakers and aides has upended the traditional rhythms of the White House, influencing many spheres, including policy, his burgeoning relationship with Congress, and whether he taps out a late-night or early morning tweet. Those Trump tweet storms, which contain some of his most controversial utterances, are usually prompted by something he has seen on television just moments before. The president, advisors said, also uses details gleaned from cable news as a starting point for policy discussions or a request for more information, and appears on TV himself when he wants to appeal directly to the public. Some White House officials, who early on would appear on TV to emphasize points to their boss, who was likely to be watching just steps away in his residence, have started tuning into Fox News's Fox and Friends because they know the president habitually clicks it on after waking near dawn. And, like his old habit in the campaign was, of course, to wake up at 5 a.m. and spend 5 hours watching them on television before even reporting to work. But Trump's habits have consequences far beyond being the quirky, unchanging ways of a 70-year-old man who keeps an eye on cable as he goes about his day, as his confidants describe his behavior. Foreign diplomats have urged their government's leaders to appear on television when they're stateside as a means of making their case to Trump. And U.S. lawmakers regard a TV appearance as nearly on par with an Oval Office meeting in terms of showcasing their standing or viewpoints to the president. And that's likely true, too. You remember when we were reading a couple of weeks ago the evaluation, was it the Arlington or Fairfax or Alexandria planning board person who was trying to describe, wanted to make sure that everybody understood Trump as real estate developer, and that he had a profile of how real estate developers work, and that they don't read anything. And if you wanted to get their attention, you had to do a phone call with them. You could tell them anything on the phone, but if you write them a letter, they'll ignore it. You got to get them on the phone to get in their ear. With Trump, it's television. That's how you know that the person who's expressing a particular viewpoint to you is an important person, not that they've been invited to the White House to tell them. You might ordinarily say that person is a policy expert or is a recognized leader in this area, this policy area, because they get invited to the White House to discuss it with the president. What makes, I guess he doesn't value that anymore because, one, he didn't respect the previous president, and two, I don't even think he really respects himself as president. It doesn't mean anything that I'm inviting people to the White House, especially since I know the reason I invite somebody to the White House to tell me something about it is that I have seen them on television discussing it. And that means, objectively, that they are a serious person to be taken seriously in their views about this thing. Otherwise, they wouldn't make it on television. I mean, I think he really views things that way, like as though television producers vet the importance of stories that they're doing. And at some level they do, but I mean, that's like the only reason why that would even happen on television. But how do you explain things like, why are they interviewing Victoria's Secret models on Fox and Friends if they're supposed to be a serious news source? And the answer is, of course, in Donald Trump's world, hot chicks are a serious issue. Like, I might take, here's a guy who believes that every moment of his time is worth $1 billion. But I might take some time out to grope one of them, so that must be a very valuable thing. My time is very valuable. If I'm spending it not working on projects, but trying to get my hand up this model's dress, well, the market says that's a very valuable thing for me to be doing, I guess. He might actually believe that. Anyway, once again, back to the article. Former House Speaker Newt Gingrich, believe it or not, said Trump's intense monitoring cuts both ways. At times, it'll lead to mistakes, he said. Other times, it lets him move with astounding speed. It's all part of him being this work in progress who is constantly listening and evolving. Gingrich said, that's a very generous spin on all of that. Explaining his decision to launch 59 Tomahawk cruise missiles into Syrian airspace or at a Syrian airbase, Trump even cited, publicly and privately, the gruesome images of dead and dying Syrian children poisoned with the nerve agent sarin, images that dominated television for several days. I think he tried to shift that over to, Ivanka told me about it, but he really saw it on television. She probably complained about it and said, I saw it too. President Trump is someone who comes to the White House with a sophisticated understanding of how to communicate, the power of television, the power of imagery, the power of message, and how to message, how message, messenger, and delivery all work together, said Kellyanne Conway, counselor to the president. The president's fascination with television is born of his personal experience. Trump, long a fixture in the New York tabloids, did not become a household presence until 2004, outside of New York anyway, when he began hosting NBC's hit reality TV show The Apprentice. He relished the attention, boasting about it and fretting over his ratings, much as he now handles political polls. He is also a natural showman. During the campaign, he riveted viewers with his raucous rallies, where he often spoke for more than an hour without any notes or teleprompters, like me. And although I use notes, I read these articles. And in TV interviews, he sometimes offers tips on matters including lighting and chair placement with an intuitive sense of what makes for good TV. He is very attuned to the fact that cable networks have a 24-hour day that they need to fill. And if you're interesting, you are gold, Gingrich said. Trump's quotidian viewing is unremarkable based on his profile. Fox News' average primetime viewer last year, for instance, was 68 years old and mostly white, and the average American watches more than 4 hours per day, according to Nielsen data. On his campaign plane, Trump watched television on full volume, usually Fox News, sometimes CNN. That came up in the interview, too. I never watched CNN. I was watching CNN the other day, and they said, I thought you said you never watched CNN. What? No, I didn't. Yes, you did 2 minutes ago. That was actually part of the transcript. But on his campaign plane, he watched it often at full volume, almost constantly, said someone who flew with him, shushing his aides whenever he himself came on the screen and listening with rapt attention. What did I say? When Hillary Clinton appeared, he'd similarly quiet his team, often before pointing a finger at the TV and scolding, "She's lying! She's lying!" He's just a couch potato idiot. That's all there is. To relax, however, he would occasionally watch the Golf Channel while on his plane or in the clubhouses of some of his private courses, which, of course, we observed him doing a couple weeks ago. That was his meeting. Now that he's in the White House, friends and aides describe a president who still consumes a steady diet of cable news. During an intimate lunch recently with key outside allies in a small West Wing dining room, for instance, Trump repeatedly paused the conversation to make the group watch a particularly combative Spicer briefing. Trump turns on the television almost as soon as he wakes, then checks in periodically throughout the day in the small dining room off of the Oval Office and continues late into the evening when he's back in his private residence. Once he goes upstairs, there's no managing him, said one advisor. Sometimes at night, he hate watches cable shows critical of him while chatting on the phone with friends, said someone familiar with the president's routine, a quirk a senior official jokingly called multi-teching. In the morning, The president typically flips between Fox and Friends, Maria Bartiromo's show on Fox Business, and CNBC's Squawk Box. West Wing aides assert that the president stopped watching MSNBC's Morning Joe after the show's hosts grew increasingly critical of his presidency, but some confidants think he still tunes in, especially for the top of the program. His feelings towards CNN and its president, Jeff Zucker, who greenlighted The Apprentice when he was running NBC Entertainment, are similarly fraught. Trump is furious with Zucker for what he thinks is the network's unfair coverage of him, but admires Zucker's business bona fides and ratings growth. Said a friend, most of the televisions in the West Wing display 4 channels at all times: CNN, Fox, Fox Business, and MSNBC. The president also likes One America News, a conservative-leaning channel whose correspondent often gets questions in Spicer's daily news briefing, and before the campaign told an aide that he occasionally enjoyed watching Al Jazeera. He's still in touch with Roger Ailes, just to wrap that loose end up, the former Fox News chairman who was ousted amid charges of sexual harassment and who unofficially advised Trump near the end of his presidential campaign. But Trump has told friends he thinks Fox News is nicer to him in the post-Ailes era. Fox News host Sean Hannity, meanwhile, is especially close to Trump's 2 older sons, as well as to the president. Well, there's considerably more, but I'm not going to be able to fit all of that in there. I just wanted to kind of remind you just what a Mike TV this doofus actually is before, handing things over to the guys on the after show. That, of course, coming up next right here on Netroots Radio. And I'll tell you a little bit about what's coming up on the show in today, anyway, in just a second. I just also wanted to point out today I did see in the news that Trump will be, I think, making a speech at the Holocaust Memorial Museum? Is he going there to give it, of course, being Holocaust Remembrance Day? Just crossing our fingers that he doesn't say anything like, I like people who weren't Holocausted, okay? Or something similarly dumb. And I guess Sebastian Gorka was busy, so he couldn't make the speech. So instead, Trump's going to go and take care of things, take care of business over at the Holocaust. Congratulating them on their Holocausting, I guess, the way he congratulated the soldier to whom he was awarding a Purple Heart. Not normally the traditional presidential commentary that goes along thanking them for their service, yes. Congratulating them on getting shot, usually not it. Anyway, you all know about that, and you all know that the after show is coming up next, but you don't know yet what's going to be on it. But I bet you have some guesses. That would be all the rest of the balance of the day's news that I didn't cover in my reading. But I can tell you officially, citing free speech, 11 Republican attorneys general want to stop the investigation into Exxon over lying to its shareholders and the public about climate change. Free speech, yes, of course. Department of Homeland Security Secretary John Kelly says he doesn't, is it John Kelly or is it Jim Kelly? I can't remember. No, Jim Kelly's the quarterback. John Kelly, okay, says he doesn't know how to stop domestic terrorism if it isn't done by brown people at a border. You know, it doesn't work that way in the United States, right? And U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions, I'm sorry I had to say that, accuses the New York City Police Department of being ineffectual in stemming the city's murder epidemic that doesn't exist, because, of course, they've stemmed it. For the last half, they'll be reporting on carrier workers who are not happy about losing their jobs after Trump's deal. What happened with that? And the second round of the French elections will be the far right versus the European Union. All of that, plus the Connect, Unite, Act, Daily Kos Community Calendar, and more on the After Show with Wink and Justice next, right here.
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
And we thank you very much for doing that. We'll be back tomorrow, of course, and for the balance of the week. Hey, don't forget that you can help support the show. Keep us on the air with your donation, with a monthly recurring donation at patreon.com/KagroX, or if you prefer a one-time donation with our easy-to-use Square Cash